We're ready to begin the meeting.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, members. The meeting is called to order at 10:02 a.m. I will proceed with roll call. Member Baker.
Present.
Member Broussard.
Here.
Member Burton. Here. Dr. Kaur.
Here.
Superintendent Hoffman. Member Kay.
Here.
Dr. Robbins. Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Present.
Member Narducci.
Here.
A quorum has been established. Members, item 1 on today's agenda is the presentation of candidates and election of State Board of Education officers for 2022. This morning, the nominating committee of members Burton, Broussard, and Kay met and have prepared a slate of candidates for this board to take action on for agenda item number 1. The slate that has been prepared for you today by those members have Lucas Narducci serving as president and Dr. Daniel Kaur serving as vice president. So the slate of candidates is Narducci as president, Dr. Kaur as vice president. Members, you may also nominate individuals for these positions from the floor. Do any members have any recommendations for the board leadership positions at this time? Hearing none, members in person will be receiving a paper ballot. Members who are currently on Zoom, you have received an email from Jessica this morning with a Google form. Both the paper ballot and the Google ballot allow for individuals to enter other board members in both of those positions if members wish to do so. Please take a moment to cast your ballot for board leadership positions. Please sign your ballot.
All the votes are in digitally.
Members, having reviewed the ballots, the board's leadership for the 2022 calendar year will be Lucas Narducci as president and Dr. Kaur as vice president. President Narducci, I will turn the meeting over to you for item number 2, business reports.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you everybody on the board for another vote of confidence and the entire board. And I know I speak for both Daniel and myself that we really appreciate everybody and every member of this board, as well as all the staff, and being able to carry out the work that we think is so important for our K-12 system, public system in the state. And Daniel, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, you captured it. I'm humbled and ready to get to work.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. With that, I don't have any further comments for the president's report, and we can move on to item 2B, superintendent's report. And Superintendent Hoffman is continuing on maternity leave. We will Kate Wright again to provide the superintendent's report. Kate.
Thank you, President Narducci. Congratulations, and to Vice President Kaur, members of the board. I appreciate you letting me be here with you this morning for what I anticipate to be my last update on behalf of Superintendent Hoffman. I'll start by respectfully acknowledging the geographical landscape of Maricopa County, sits on the ancestral homelands of those indigenous nations who have inhabited the land for centuries, including the Pima, Lehigh, and Lavine peoples. I have just a few updates this morning. The first is very logistical. Just a reminder to our LEAs that the deadline to apply for ESSER 3 funds is February 1st, 2022. It's coming quickly. I can hardly believe when I looked at my calendar this morning that that is next week, that we will be welcoming the month of February. This is a deadline that we've communicated to the U.S. Department of Ed, so we are hoping that all applications will be submitted no later than February the 1st. Our ADE team remains committed to supporting our LEAs in this process. We will be having an open office hour on January the 27th between 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. where LEAs can call in at any point within that hour for help to speak with a specific specialist. Our team, Devin Isherwood and Allison Barber, can be contacted anytime outside of those office hours as well for support. I also want to mention that some of our LEAs have already applied and received funds, and just to give an update to the board and to our stakeholders in regards to the kinds of things that LEAs are using ESSER 3 dollars to do. They have adopted and purchased new curriculum to better support students' needs as identified in COVID recovery. They are adding additional staff to lower class sizes, which increases the opportunity for small group instruction. They are improving physical activity spaces. They are improving their HVAC and ventilation systems, and they are providing retention and recruitment stipends to support staffing needs. All of this information and more is on our ESSER website, azed.esser3, for any of the information regarding contacts and our office hours. Additionally, I just want to take a second this morning to provide an update on some exciting opportunities that are coming for educators and for leaders. We have our Arizona Educator Job Fair on Saturday, February the 26th. This morning, I encourage our LEAs to register for a booth so that they can use this time to seek out new employees to add to their community. Those interested in registering for a booth or for attending need to just visit our website. Registration is accessed right there. Additionally, I encourage those who are interested to please register for our upcoming ADE Principals Academy. In April, we will be starting our 2022 cohort. This is free professional learning. It provides tools and strategies and resources to assist principals in the observation and evaluation process. And I want to send another quick reminder out regarding our Arizona Peer Educator Support Program. This is a program that allows for teachers to get paired with a trained mentor coach who is confidentially listening and providing support during what we know are still continuing to be challenging times for educators. And that information on that program can be found at azeducator.org. Finally, and maybe most exciting to share, Superintendent Hoffman will be returning from maternity leave. She has been enjoying her time with Clara, her new baby, but she will be returning to the agency full-time in just a couple of weeks at the start of February, and will be resuming her work with the state board at that time as well. So again, I thank you for granting me the opportunity to share these updates and time with you over the last couple of months, and I look forward to supporting the state board in their work in 2022. President Narducci, thank you again.
Thank you, Kate. Really appreciate all you've done in the last couple of months, and really glad that Superintendent Hoffman has been able to have this time with her new baby. Move on to item number 3, which is our call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams, I think we've received 2 requests.
Yes, President Narducci, members of the board. First up, we have Kayla Spadine, followed by Rebecca Cross. Kayla? Jessica, is Kayla on the call?
Kayla is on the call.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kayla. Go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. President Narducci, members of the board, thank you for hearing my comment. I would like to bring a comment publicly about the ADE and the Parent Advisory Committee. I know that that is not a direct part of the meeting today, but things have been happening this month that I think it's pertinent to bring this comment. I'd like to comment on the ADE's continued unwillingness to work with parents on communication, specifically through the Parent Advisory Committee, or PAC. The second committee was put together in July of this last year, and in these last 7.5 months, the ADE has held only one PAC meeting, which itself was a pale comparison to the multiple meetings we had in the year prior that were collaborative, much more effective and informative, involving parents at a much higher caliber. This first PAC meeting that they had this school year was dominated by Director Terry O'Brien and Ms. Sarah Raybon. The PAC meeting was, the PAC members that were allowed to be there were not allowed to contribute to the agenda in any meaningful way, nor were allowed to give free comments. And additionally, parents attending the meeting were given less than 24 hours notice to attend this meeting, which violated the PAC charter that was written. They are supposed to give 10 days notice. The reason why this is an important comment to make today is because earlier this month, 2 of the most invested and active members of the current PAC, the current committee, publicly resigned because their repeated attempts to contact the ADE regarding the meetings and getting more meetings to happen, considering, again, it's been 7 months and only one meeting has occurred, has fallen on deaf ears, and the communication has not gone back and forth. It has just increasingly apparent to parents that the ADE is continuing to act not in good faith regarding these things. Communication issues has been a big topic that has been brought to you at these meetings multiple times, and we just can't seem to get resolution with that. The PAC meetings are supposed to be a great way for parents and the department to come together honestly and transparently and effectively to find solutions to ongoing issues. And if the department isn't willing to act in good faith in regards to these meetings, parents aren't sure what to do. And the way that it's going, I'm disheartened that we seem to be going backwards compared to last year with the PAC meetings. I wanted to let you all know, and I thank you for your interest and continued willingness to hear ESA parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Keela. Just for the board's record, Dr. Robbins joined the meeting virtually at 10:15. Next up, we have Rebecca Cross. Rebecca?
Executive Director Williams, Rebecca Cross has not joined the meeting.
President Narducci, that concludes call to public number 3.
Thank you. Thanks for the comment. We'll move on to our consent agenda, which is item number 4 on the agenda. And to begin with, just like to acknowledge that Member Wellborn has recused herself on item 4B, and therefore we will take that item in a separate vote. All members will vote on the following. Do I have a motion to approve items 4A and items 4C through 4J?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Burton. Any discussion? Everybody on video, please unmute and show faces. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. And we'll move on to item 4B regarding move on when ready. Do I have a motion to approve item 4B?
President Narducci, let's actually move on when reading.
When reading, sorry.
Literacy plans.
Sorry, reading, sorry. Move on when reading. Do I have a motion to approve item 4B?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Dr. Robbins. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, the ayes have it. Move on to item 5. Call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams, I believe we received 2 speaker requests.
Yes, President Arducci, we have 2 speakers today signed up for item 5. Prior to me calling the speakers, I'd like to put into the record that we received comments pertaining to agenda item 6B from Robbie Copridge, the Holbrook Superintendent, Emily Ann Gullickson, A for Arizona, Aaron Hart, Education Forward. We also received a written comment on item 6A from Andrew Ridley, the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity. First speaker today is Dr. Mark Jornstad, followed by Quinn Kellis. Dr. Jornstad.
Good morning, President Narducci, Vice President Kaur, members of the board. I'm Dr. Mark Jornstad, Executive Director of the Arizona School Administrators. Thank you for your continued leadership and service to the families, students, children, and communities of Arizona. I'm here to support the proposed changes in Rule 7-2-614 on other teaching certificates. Rural, suburban, and urban schools are urgently in need of substitute teachers. This change will not be a panacea, but will offer help. ASA especially supports the modification of the 120-day limit on a substitute teaching in the same district for 1 year and the possibility of exemption from that limit in the same school. Many districts engage substitutes to work in one school. This practice allows that person to become familiar with the school, its routines, its staff, and its students, and become recognized by the students as another staff member, not a substitute teacher. Then arbitrarily, 120 days are up right around the end of January, and boom, it comes to an end. Even worse, if a long-term substitute teacher has successfully become embedded in a classroom and its culture and developed a positive relationship with the students, that suddenly comes to an end as well, and the room then is seeking a new teacher after 120 days. We urge removal of this obstacle. Extending the emergency certificate to 2 years will allow the holders of this certification extra time to complete courses or in-service hours required for its reissuance and to acquire the training to succeed in doing more than, frankly, holding down the fort. So this is critical. Does an emergency situation exist right now? Let me give one example. Last week, Maricopa County Health reported at a meeting with superintendents and administrators that there were 304 outbreaks in schools in the 2 weeks since the holidays. Similar situations exist throughout the state. For verification, ask any principal you know. Where will you find them? In a classroom covering for teachers. So thank you for having this meeting, considering this item, and then having the special meeting to make it take place at once. We appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Jornstad. Next up, we have Superintendent Quinn Kellis. Superintendent.
Good morning, President Arducci, members of the board, staff. Thank you very much for considering this item as I'm going to be speaking about the substitutes. And, you know, it's nothing over the last 2 years has done more to prove that the best thing for students being in the classroom is the fact that students are in the classrooms. And as we consider what that entails, administrators, superintendents, principals are making extraordinary efforts to keep their schools open so that kids can be in the classrooms. One of the biggest barriers to this, obviously, is the pandemic continues, and with absenteeism, we have vacancies even on an interim basis, but also we have many who are just leaving their jobs for the rest of the year. And it's not that they wouldn't have continued under normal circumstances, but we're not in normal circumstances. So as we look for long-term coverage, we very much appreciate the efforts that are being taken here by the board to consider changes to the certification for substitutes. Dr. Dr. Jornstad just mentioned about the 120 days. It would be awesome to just put a 24-month suspension on that 120-day limit until this crisis has over and we can resume some semblance of normalcy. But as we look at where our vacancies are on a temporary basis, we had 200 vacancies from COVID in our district, in the Dysart School District today. And we have about 60 substitutes. That means we have about 140 empty classrooms where we are scrambling to fill those classrooms with an adult. And the fact that our substitutes are also a little bit nervous about being in the classroom, we need to build that pool of substitutes. That's on a day-to-day basis. We tap that same pool for the long-term assignments. And so to be able to have those substitutes available through whatever means is greatly appreciated. I appreciate the efforts by staff at both the board, at the department, and the Certification Advisory Committee for their work in preparing this. Every one of the recommendations is directly related to a specific barrier that we are facing in the schools. So I appreciate your acknowledgement of the issue and your willingness to make a solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent Cullis. President Narducci, members, that concludes item number 5.
Thank you. Thanks for the comments. We really appreciate those. We do appreciate the situation that's happening out there, and appreciate everyone who's involved in trying to help in that situation, and all the teachers that are going to the classrooms, and all the subs that are going there, as well as all the administrators that are going into the classrooms. That will move on to item number 6A on the agenda. Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, members of the board. Item 6A is the board's approval of the College and Career Readiness Index, also known as the CCRI spreadsheets, within the ACRF accountability system for the 21-22 school year. The board's had substantial conversations around the accountability system for 21-22. Recently approved EdReady and diploma seals to include with the rubric. Additionally, based upon feedback from the Office of Economic Opportunity, there was a request to include the ACRC in addition to ACT work keys. It's a secondary test that the state gives to students, and therefore we wanted to recognize that assessment. That's through the Arizona Economic Opportunity Office. So with that, it's pretty straightforward. If there's any questions, I'm available. If not, I would tell you to move the motion there, President Narducci.
Thank you, Director Williams. Any questions for Director Williams? Seeing none on the board and none at the table, do I have a motion to approve the College and Career Readiness Index for the 2021-2022 accountability system and school year as outlined in the executive summary, to include the addition of EdReady, the ACRC, and the collection of diploma seal data?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Robbins. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Burton. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item 6B, Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, members of the board. Item 6B is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to open emergency rulemaking procedures for R7-2-614 other teaching certificates. The board has received numerous written comments pertaining to this agenda item, as well as heard from 2 speakers. Deputy Director Baden can provide additional information and answer any questions that board members may have.
President Narducci and members, I'm available for questions. And appreciate, I guess I should just mention, I think certainly on staff, appreciate the work and cooperation of ASA and Superintendent Cullis, who sort of raised a lot of these issues at some meetings over the fall, and also RASC, who worked with us and certification staff, at the Department of Education to get to where we're at. So just appreciate their cooperation and we're able to work on this.
Thank you, Ketcher. Thank you, Alicia. Before we move on and I ask for a motion, I do want to thank you very much for all the work that's been done, but also ask for just a little further explanation of how all of this came about into the rulemaking, because this is a big deal. I know it'll help the field a lot. It'll help our students and all of our administrators. So if you could just go on a little bit and explain so that we just have a little better record of what we're doing here.
Sure, President Narducci and members. The first that I think formally came to my awareness was probably a Guppy Back meeting in the fall, and Superintendent Ellis that brought it up. Even in the fall, there were some struggles already starting to emerge that I think had sort of bled over from the previous year or two of finding substitutes and filling classrooms to the extent that Superintendent Ellis just outlined. Following that meeting, we had some conversations with the department cert staff and found that the emergency substitute certificate that already existed was a good pathway for that. But there were some parallel conversations and other superintendents, usually superintendents, who had also brought up some ideas about how to address issues that they were also dealing with. Specifically, some of the superintendents in Yavapai County. And so that because we were hearing it from parallel tracks, that usually is an indication to staff that that's something that, you know, is rising to the surface of something that we need to address. And then, so that's why we worked on that draft for the Certification Advisory Committee, and around that time, media reports of the issues that schools were having was starting to accelerate. And I think even since the Certification Advisory Committee recommended that rule in December, I think the number of media stories has just increased, and the number of questions and comments and concerns from school districts and charter schools trying to fill positions due to the issues finding people to fill classrooms has only increased since then. So we've heard concerns from superintendents and some superintendents and HR folks, parallel tracks. Sometimes they're joining together to provide comments, but sometimes it was just they separately were reaching out to us, and then the media reports that just sort of snowballed into indicating that some action was needed. And the Certification Advisory Committee reiterated and reemphasized all of those same concerns, and obviously recommended unanimously this review.
Thank you very much. Great job all around. Any questions or comments for Ketcher, Alicia, or other staff on this one? From the board? From the table? Okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion to find emergency rulemaking procedures are necessary due to the emergency employment situation facing schools, evidenced by the public comments and media reports, and pursuant to the board's rulemaking procedures, open emergency rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2-614 other teaching certificates? I have a motion by member Burton. Do I have a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I have a second by member Baker. Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, which is information only. Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, members of the board. Item 6C is a presentation discussion regarding the educator discipline report. This was posted on Assembly this morning. Those of you who are virtual, you can access this document in Assembly. Those of you in person, I did make hard copies for you. As you are aware, the board staff puts together yearly reports on the board's adjudicated cases. A big, huge thanks to Jessica Mueller from board staff who put this report together and made all the pretty charts and really has a deep understanding of the case data. Also, the certification desk, Bruce and Elise were working with Jessica to ensure that we understood the certification end of the data. So real quick overview, you'll see that the board adjudicated 146 cases in 2021. This is lower than what we've adjudicated previously. And really, it's just for the simple fact that there were PPAC meetings we would have to cancel due to COVID, and people didn't feel comfortable coming into PPAC. We also had some cases last year that were more in-depth. So our assistant attorney generals just needed more time to prepare those cases, which ended up like canceling some monthly PPAC so that our lawyers could prepare for the next meeting. We are projected to have close to 200 cases this year in 2022. And if you recall, the State Board of Education's budget request includes a request for additional assistant attorney generals, which will more than likely double the work that comes before the State Board of Education, as we will be doubling the amount of the legal work that's required in these adjudicated cases. The largest reporter to the investigative unit, so that means where the case originates from, how we learn of it, still sits with school officials. So school officials are still reporting it to the investigative unit. And that's followed closely in second place by the Department of Public Safety and fingerprint clearance card hits. So that means that an individual is arrested, they hold a fingerprint clearance card, they're an educator in the state of Arizona, and the board's investigative unit receives that fingerprint clearance card hit, in which the chief investigator reviews the hit and then opens a case if it's warranted. Something new for this year is Exhibit 5, which can be found on page 7. Exhibit 5 shows the change over time of adjudicated cases by sex, male and female. I thought it was interesting to note that we do see some rises in female adjudicated cases between 18 and 19. Male teachers are still more likely to engage in activities that warrant board discipline. However, we still are seeing less than 1% of certified teachers being adjudicated by the board. Still a very small number. Secondary cert holders continue to see the highest rate of discipline. When we combine secondary cert holders with elementary and substitute cert holders, that accounts for 1/3 of all of the cases that the board sees. Category 1 cases are those cases that are sexual in nature. And remember, it spans from the grooming, inappropriate messages, grooming, luring, touching, all the way up into a 15/550, which is a permanent revocation, ultimately usually dealing with some type of sexual conduct. Those still make up the majority of the board's adjudicated cases. However, when just looking at the 2021 cases that came before the board, the majority of those cases actually were assault cases. And those assault cases represented 37% of the 146 cases. Out of the 1,107 cases that have come before the board since 2012, 413 educators have chosen to surrender their certs. 186 were suspended. 130 were captured by law or statute, to include the 15/550s, as I mentioned before. And 129 educators were revoked. The recommendations are pretty straightforward. As in previous educator discipline reports brought before the board, staff includes recommendations to continue to develop preventative measures, and that is in line with the board's fiscal year 23 budget request. If you recall, the board is requesting an FTE and funding to assist with developing some professional development training that could be utilized by districts and teachers free of charge. Looking ahead to the next report, The next report should contain some information on non-certified educators. If you recall, the board's authority expanded last legislative session to include the non-certified educators. That bill went into effect in September of 2021. We have been receiving some non-certified allegations and complaints in which the investigative unit is investigating. Once those investigations have concluded, then we'll start seeing them on our board agendas as they go through the due process of PPAC or negotiate settlement agreements, et cetera. That was a quick overview of the discipline report. If members have any questions or if members want to see something specific for later reports, I'm available for questions.
Members? Members remotely, any questions or comment?
Just a quick thank you to Jessica for pulling this together, really just well organized and presented, so thank you.
President Arducci, members of the board, Alicia. On exhibit number 13, it lays out the types of disciplinary actions by certain certificate. Is there a chart or is there information regarding the percentage of so this is
You're looking for the end counts, Member Baker?
Yeah, well, yeah, what's the percentage by category?
There's an appendix on the last page, which Jessica has separated out the raw numbers that make up exhibit 13. So you'll see for secondary, there's a total of 308 secondary certs in which the board has taken action on. 160 of those were sexual offenses, 42 assault, 63 substance abuse, 22 fraud theft, 21 breach of contract. Does that answer your question, Member Baker?
It's helpful. What is the percentage of, maybe I'm looking at the numbers, not saying it, but what's the like of all the substitute teachers, there's 10,000 of them, what's the percentage that have been disciplined as compared to other?
Sure. So on exhibit 9, you have the rate of discipline by certificate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And please note that exhibit 9 does not match the rate of discipline by sex in exhibit 6 due to first time applicant data. That's included in exhibit 6.
One final question.
Yes, sure.
We've looked over this information, and it's great stuff. Thank you very much for putting it together. But is there anything else that, as you spent much more time with it than us, that stands out to you or that we should be tuned into?
President Arducci, Member Baker, I believe that if the board continues with its initial recommendations of seeking preventative measures, and if the budget request is approved, I think we could be a national leader in creating that professional development training, or at least have it available for people to seek out on the board's website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Member Baker was discussing, with respect to the preventative measures, is there anything that has been seen as either a issue or practice or whatever that you feel could be improved upon in reporting by districts and or charters more promptly, rather than waiting. I know we leave a lot to our LEAs and our charters discretion to come, what comes forward. Is there something that you've seen that might be suggested as we move along to them to actually move things forward to us so that we don't get to a position of a higher level issue?
Sure. So President Arducci, members of the board, I think there are two potential outcomes to your question. One is ensuring that board staff and the investigative unit staff of the board continue to train the HR professionals, both at the district and the charter levels, and ensuring that HR professionals and anyone within a school system who is in charge of hiring practices, that they understand the state systems and they know where to look to determine if Joe Smith has had discipline taken against his certificate, right? Because you want to ensure that that individual may not go back into a classroom, ensuring that they're meeting the requirements of state law. The second area is preventative in nature based upon the research that I've studied and I've read and the conversations I've had with who I consider to be the leading national expert on this issue, which is Dr. Carol Shakeshaft out of the University, Commonwealth of Virginia University. She's worked her whole entire career around sexual misconduct with teachers and students, even going so far in testifying to the US Senate and House, her research studies. Her objective is to instruct educators so that they're aware of the potential improprieties that could be going on. Because the individual who maybe commits something that would fall under the most egregious, which is category 1, may know better and choose to engage. To her point, it's most important to instruct the administrators and the teachers that are around that person so that the behavior can stop within the trajectory before it gets to the most egregious. So what does inappropriate communication look like? What does it sound like? What does inappropriate boundaries look like? Because a lot of the times the inappropriate communication or the boundaries look like a great teacher who is very empathetic to their students. And we also know the majority of teachers are never going to come before the board. But then the question then that the board needs to ask itself is, how are we ensuring that future students are protected as much as possible and that the adults in the classroom know specific signs that they should be aware of? And I think the board's in a good position to provide some of that training on top of the other disciplinary categories in which the board takes action on. For the simple fact that if people know, then maybe their actions would not happen or their behavior would not happen. The question we're trying to solve is, do educators know that this is outside of category 1, right? So DUIs, multiple DUIs with a child in the car. Do educators know that that could potentially be something? Do educators know that if they break a contract, that it's something that the board can take action on? And I think the board has the responsibility and the opportunity to provide information to those individuals so that they know ahead of time before they engage in that type of conduct.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everybody, for that presentation. Move on to item 6D, Director Williams.
Thank you. President Arducci, members of the board, item 6D is a presentation, discussion, and possible action on the recommendation to approve the parent guardian's appeal and reverse the Arizona Department of Education decision to terminate the empowerment scholarship account contracts for students JS, CS, AS, and HS for 2020-2021 school year, appeal case number 00045. Please recall that any conversation that would need to occur on this agenda item would need to happen in executive session outside of what's provided publicly in the executive summary sheet.
Thank you, Director Williams. Is there any questions that need to be provided to staff regarding item 6D? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the administrative law judge to reverse the department's decision to terminate the 2020-2021 ESA contracts for students JS, CS, AS, and HS, and approve the parents, guardians, PS's ESA appeal number 00045?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Burton. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second by member Baker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to item 6E, Director Williams.
Thank you, President Arducci, members of the board. This is the second ESA appeal on today's agenda. It's possible action regarding the recommendation to deny the parent guardian OS's appeal and affirm the Arizona Department of Education's denial of reimbursement in Empowerment Scholarship Account appeal case number 00224.
Okay, same issues regarding confidentiality apply on this one. Any questions regarding this case for staff? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the administrative law judge to deny the parent guardians OS's ESA appeal number 00224 and affirm the department's denial of the reimbursement?
So moved.
I have a motion by member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Dr. Core. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6F with Deputy Director Baden regarding legislative affairs.
President Arducci and members, we are starting off our new legislative session from a couple of weeks ago. I'll be very brief today, just as a reminder to board members how we usually operate during the session is the legislative committee meets weekly. That committee is always the president, vice president, who are in Dr. Core, and then a third member who is member Burton. That committee meets weekly. It gives staff direction on providing feedback to the legislature on pending proposals. The legislative committee does have the authority to direct staff to sign in support of legislation. That committee does not have the authority to direct us to oppose anything that requires a full vote of the board. So just with that recap out of the way on procedural things, the executive budget was released a couple weeks ago, along with the state of the state. Just some quick top line numbers that I'm sure will get lost in as soon as I start saying them. But right now, the state is projected to have roughly $1 billion in balance ongoing, and about $2 billion, just over $2 billion in one-time funds available for this upcoming fiscal year. For perspective, the state's budget is about $12 billion. That is excluding any federal funds that might be going to agencies or political subdivisions. The executive budget that was released, again, that's just the governor's proposals for what he would like to see, and traditionally and historically has been the starting point for negotiations, but not always. That does include parts of the State Board of Ed's ask. As a reminder, the board had requested just over $1 million, 6 FTEs. The executive budget does include $968,000 and 4 FTEs, so largely including the board's request, which certainly on staff. We're very thankful for the governor for doing that. And we're going to keep working with them and the legislature to meet with them as we have been and make sure we're answering their questions and do what we can to fill in the blanks on the board's budget request there. So very appreciative of that. A couple other things in the executive budget just to be aware of. There's $60 million ongoing proposed to expand results-based funding, and also a proposal to have that money be distributed based on ADAP letter grants. Right now, that's how it's envisioned to be distributed in statute. But since the inception of results-based funding a few years ago, it's always been based on statewide assessment, ELA and math scores. So the executive recommends expanding that to adding $60 million and also to make sure that the funds are distributed based on ADAP letter grants. There's also $58 million for Operation Excellence, which is similar to Project Rocket from previous years, which is funding for DNF schools who have to participate now and optional for C schools that have high FRL populations. They have to partner with certain school turnaround experts, and then the board is empowered. This board would be empowered or required to take intervening action if those schools that receive the supports over a certain number of years, I believe it's 3 years or longer, don't show results in terms of turning those schools around. And then there's $100 million in federal funds for the summer camp initiative that the executive proposed, which would focus on ELA, specifically early literacy, math, and civics. And again, that's federal funds, so that presumably, well, it may require legislation, but it may not. But still, obviously, those are all still executive proposals, and it's still just January, so long way to go on all of those items, and they might change dramatically in the interview months. Two bills, really just two bills that I want to talk about today. The first is, and I'm happy you've received the legislative update, a couple others up to this point, but the whole list of bills right now, that list is rather expansive because we're including, anything that directly impacts the board, excluding some bills that we're not necessarily anticipating ending up on agendas, but that may change. That list will probably continue to grow here for the next week or two, but then fortunately for you all and for myself, it'll start whittling down as the bills swap chambers. So I'm happy to answer questions on any of those, but there are two bills that I wanted to talk about in particular. The first is Senate Bill 1159, which is being heard in committee tomorrow, and that's legislation on certification changes. Does several things around certification. One is expanding the current subject matter expert certificate, which is currently a 612 certificate, meaning it only authorizes those holders to teach in grades 6-12. It's expanding that to K-12. There's also, maybe even my language on that should be adjusted. There's also some changes in the bill to try to redefine what a standard certificate is. So the subject matter expert certificate, for example, is actually called a subject matter expert. I think it's a standard certificate is what it's called in statute. The same thing with the classroom-based certificate is a classroom-based standard teaching certificate. The bill, I think, is trying to attempt to say there's one standard certificate and there's multiple routes to getting that standard certificate rather than chunking out the certificates. But that's potentially some mechanics that we'll work on as we get farther and deeper into the bill. There are other changes in that bill, like creating, similar to the classroom-based prep program, of which we have 3 in the state currently, a essentially classroom-based prep program, but for administrators. It's a leadership-based prep program. Our board would be approving that much in the same way. The language is almost identical to the language that's used for classroom-based programs. And then there's some other changes and tweaks that are kind of tweaking and changing some things that were put into place a few years ago. And then there's also a change relative to what we were talking about today about substitute certificates that would not require substitute certificates to have a bachelor's degree. Currently under statute, they are required to have a bachelor's degree. Emergency substitutes are not required to have a bachelor's degree. But this statutory change would make the substitute certificate not have to have a bachelor's degree. One thing I wanted to note on that legislation, based on discussions from the legislative committee, and then of course, anything that the board wants to add to that. Earlier today, we had talked about the educator discipline report. The board's legislative committee did express some concerns, I guess we could say, about educator discipline and the rates of discipline, and the increasing number of rates of discipline and the seriousness of that discipline, and has asked the proponents of the bill, and we'll actually have a meeting here with Senator Gray in about an hour, assuming that the board continues to agree with this, to require all standard certificate holders to receive training or coursework in ethics and professionalism within 3 years of their certificate being issued. Right now, that's already required in the rule for folks who go through traditional preparation programs, but it is not required for folks who have some of these other different pathways. So we're still working with the proponents of that on that language, and hopefully have a good meeting here in about an hour on that language. We'll see kind of what happens there. The second bill I wanted to bring up was House Bill 2278. That's actually not on this week's agenda, but might be on an agenda pretty quickly. That is a alternative graduation pathway bill sponsored by Mr. Fillmore. This would require the board to come up with graduation requirements, a separate track of graduation requirements for students to be able to graduate from high school with, instead of 4 years of math, which is currently Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and the 4th year of math, that's advanced math, is how we word it. That's aligned to the state university's entrance requirements. This bill would require the board to have an alternative minimum graduation requirement track that students could do, which would be Algebra 1, Geometry, and then a third math that I believe, I forgot the language of it, but examples would include things like personal finance or statistics or business mathematics. So it would be taking out 1 credit of math and specifically Algebra 2. So we would have 3 instead of 4. One of them would not be Algebra 2. Historically, a couple years ago, Representative Udall ran a similar bill, and the board expressed concerns about the impact on college readiness that would have for students and career readiness. But the board several years ago implemented that 4 years of math to align with college entrance requirements, because the 2 biggest barriers based on data and research historically for students entering college is either Algebra 2 or this foreign language. And so the board, when it implemented those graduation requirements beginning with the graduating class of 2013, wanted to make sure that those Algebra 2 specifically was being offered to students, especially students who historically would not have access to those courses, tend to be students in poverty or tended to be students of color. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention because that's something that we've worked on before. That came up a couple of years ago. The board 2 years ago, just as a reminder, was just neutral on that bill, but did have concerns. The higher education community, universities specifically, I believe might have even been signed and opposed on that legislation. At that time, we had offered to study the issue, and that's actually reflected in our budget request too. We haven't been able to do that due to capacity issues, but because we have had that 4 years of math for several graduating classes and students matriculating up now for several years, it might be a good time to at least study the issue. But of course, this legislation would immediately create a separate track for those students. So that's just the 2 bills that I just wanted to go over real briefly here. One maybe tomorrow, one maybe next week. And I'm happy to answer any questions on those or any others that are on the list, or anything else that's not on the list that you want to throw out for me. I'm happy to try to answer those as well.
Thank you, Catcher. I'm going to play Member Burton. You go first.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. President Narducci, Vice President Court, members of the board. I want to comment, and we did have a conversation on the legislative committee on Senate Bill 1159, but I hadn't seen this report. And my only concern about singling them out for this extra level of training is subject matter experts are actually relatively low in overall disciplinary actions in terms of the raw number. So my concern is if we're not doing this for subs, if we're not doing this for others who are taking alternate paths, I don't want to give an impression that we're singling out or making them look like, we have a concern. So I just want to be on the record that they're actually relatively low in raw numbers of how many disciplinary actions have been taken based on this report.
Yeah, President Narducci and Member Burton, a fair point to point out that raw numbers are low. Subject matter experts are based on the data that Jessica was able to pull together for us. They're disciplined at the fourth highest rate, which is still above average. But there are only 2,300 subject matter experts in the entire state. So the raw number of those disciplined is always going to be low. In fact, I think that's the lowest certificate issue that we're tracking. There are some others that are like the Native American teaching certificate, for example. That's low, but we don't chunk out separately because there's so few. So that's well taken in our discussion, and I think what our communication with Senator Gray is going to be is that the raw numbers certainly are low. The rate of discipline, though, is above average. And when we do discipline them, it based on exhibit 13, over 70% are category 1, and the average is about 38% across all certificates. When we do discipline them, it tends to be for the more serious offenses. However, as I mentioned, our communication Senator Gray and what we had discussed with the legislative committee, and the language that we provided to that effect is that we're not asking a single amount in the legislation. We're just asking statute to require all standard cert holders. And if they want to talk about substitute certificates as well, I think we're willing to discuss that as well. Would get this training in ethics and professionalism, not specifically calling out subject matter experts. And if there's other avenues too, that to get that training and coursework, not just in university and higher ed, if we get the budget asked, that's something the board can develop. NASDAQ, the national training that we already use now. There's also some schools that do a great job already providing that training and coursework. I think the legislative committee, as you recall, was open to all of those options and ideas. And if the board still agrees, I think that's still going to be our communication to Senator Gray and the legislature.
Yeah, remember, one of the things that I get concerned with is that and this is not a reflection of what you said specifically, but when we look at it and just say that, what level any provider of services to the students would be at for disciplinary action, whether they're fourth or number 1 or 5th or 6th. Our goal as a board should be that we don't have any disciplinary action taken. We shouldn't have a 4th level, we shouldn't have a 3rd level, a 2nd level, or a 1st level. Our goal should be, and we've said this repeatedly, that our kids should never leave the classroom worse than when they got there. And if in fact we can urge the legislators, as well as our districts and our charter boards to put something in place to actually have this awareness of boundaries on a repeated basis, so that it's ingrained in our folks that are in the classroom what they should not take steps beyond that can lead to trouble, I think will be better. I know from my professional seat, sitting in a law firm, we repeatedly have to take training for various things that we are aware of as lawyers, but we have to repeatedly take it to keep it fresh in our minds so that we do not violate or step over those boundaries. So I don't think it's too much to ask to have this type of training put in, an ethics training of some sort, put into a bill. And then maybe it does spread hopefully, in my mind, beyond what we're working now, and it's across the board. So that's my feel on it. Any other comments?
President Hershey, on to a different topic.
Sure.
In terms of the diploma with the lower math requirement, I'd love to hear what Dr. Ford has to say about that. As I understand it, community colleges don't have those requirements. And I just want to make a comment that as educators, we love to sort kids. Yeah, you belong there, you belong there. And you can't go on because you haven't done this. You know, we like to set up all those barriers. We found out in the district I was in, when we had all those barriers set up for advanced placement courses. When we took those barriers down, it's amazing. Way more kids signed up for advanced placement courses, and most of them were successful. And the most dramatic shift was with kids of color. Far more kids of color found success because instead of us saying, oh, you can't do that, we said, okay, go ahead, try it, see if you can. And amazingly, most of them were successful. So what we so often do with math is we tell kids that they're not successful, and we say, you can't go on, you know, stop right there. And the reality is that there's a lot of really successful people who are not great mathematicians. And so I would love to see that proceed.
A couple of thoughts. I'd be open to seeing that language myself. Obviously, to use to channel Cal there, we do sort folks, and we do sort folks unnecessarily and sometimes way too early. I'll let you know that at Arizona Western College, we did away with the AccuPlacer, and everyone starts at the beginning level English and math with additional support.
Yep.
And our success rates are right where they were. We basically eliminated developmental ed, and especially for first gen students and students of color, when our first interaction with them used to be, you're developmental, you're not quite college ready. Hundreds of those folks never enrolled, right? Because the message was, you're not ready. And as a first gen student, they often went off to somewhere. So, I think as with many things, devil in the details. I'd love to learn more. I'd love to learn what the specifics are and what support we can provide to these students to get them both higher ed ready and career ready, regardless of their choice. Second, unrelated question, the summer camp using the federal dollars, K-12 or K-8?
Dr. President Narducci and Dr. Kaur, I don't recall. I believe it was K-12. There was an emphasis on early literacy to tie in with some of the other initiatives the governor has promoted for years, but I believe it was K-12. Yeah, I believe it was K-12 because there was some credit recovery discussions as part of it as well, which of course is a little more high school side than elementary side.
Excellent. And as playing my role as a shameless shill for community colleges in Arizona, I'd love to see some of those high school students spending their summer taking community college credit and getting a jump on their higher ed career. So great. I fulfilled my role as the
Dr. Kaur, that's a great note, and we'll make sure we'll take that down to Alicia specifically, because she usually talks to the governor's office more than I do, and maybe that's something we can drop it next time.
I will drop it for you, Dr. Kaur.
Very good.
I will offer your services.
I absolutely, in any way I can facilitate that, I'd love to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm just gonna lay out a compliment, because I remember about 4 years ago, we were working at a retreat, looking at restructuring on how communications were given regarding legislative affairs and how things were to proceed with the legislature, and how the board could give input into the legislation and actually have the interaction between the board and the legislature be a good working tool. And I think Alicia and Catcher and the rest of the staff have accomplished that. So thank you so much. It's refreshing to hear and see how this is all working. So thank you. We'll move on to item number 7. This is a call to the public. I believe we have one speaker, Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams. Hey.
Thank you.
Alicia.
Thank you, President Narducci. We do have one speaker, Brian Allen. Brian Allen is here.
Thank you, board, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would just like to apologize for what I've done as a student. In no way did I intend to put this onto them. My original intention was to make this student feel like they had someone who looked up to it as a role model, but that quickly went out of control. I wanted to be the person that I did not have in high school. I own up to all the things that were said between me and them. I have learned from this major mistake, and I will make sure that this will never happen again. It was wrong for me to even text the student. I would like to apologize to the parents of the student. It was very wrong for me to have even texted this student in this manner, and the topics that were brought up in our conversations were not appropriate in the slightest. To the band directors that I worked under and the staff that I worked alongside, I am sorry that I let you down in this way. I would like to ask the board to please accept this surrender. Everybody makes mistakes, but unfortunately, I made one that will follow me for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. President Narducci, that concludes the call to the public. Jessica, does someone have their microphone? Oh, got it. That we're finished with item number 7.
Thank you to Dr. Williams. We'll move on to item number 8, consent agenda for enforcement actions. Consent agenda for enforcement actions will be taken in a single motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 8A1 through 8A7?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Dr. Robbins. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Move on to item 9, call to the public. This is the time for the public to speak on items on the board's general session of enforcement action. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams.
Thank you, President Narducci, members of the board. We did receive one written comment in regard to item 10E that was provided to the board members ahead of time. First up, we have 8 speakers total. First up, we have Antonio Moretta, followed by Ryan Tate.
Good morning, President, members of the board. My name is Antonio Moretta, and I'm respectfully asking for you to reconsider the PPAC's recommendation to revoke my license for 5 years. I have never committed a crime my entire life. I've never been the subject of a criminal investigation or a person of interest of criminal investigation. No student or parent has ever alleged that I was involved in any form of sexual misconduct. I was, however, involved in some incidents in which I used lack of judgment and made some mistakes over 4 years ago when I was a teacher. I was attempting to help students as best I could, but obviously I failed. The district at the time addressed those issues. They spoke with me about those issues. I was completely honest with them. I was candid, and I told them everything that happened. I gave them the context to everything that took place. The district corroborated everything that I said, and they made the decision, and the obvious conclusion was that yes, I did make mistakes, but I was never intending to harm any students. I moved on to a new district. The first year of that district was amazing. I received a district award. I was involved in several committees. I even attended the Leading Change conference that the ADE put on. Second year, not so much. Brand new first year principal saw something that she thought was inappropriate, and she automatically, jumped to conclusions. I was mentoring a student the same way I did the previous year. Before I got into mentoring with that student, I spoke with the social worker at the school. The social worker at the school, said it was a good idea. I spoke with the behavioral interventionists. They said it was a good idea. I spoke with all the students' teachers. They said it was a good idea. I spoke with the parents of the student, and they said it was a good idea. But the principal continued to jump to conclusions and somehow convinced the HR that I made the entire thing up, that I was, somehow made this entire mentorship up. And then the HR people at that district obviously filed a complaint and reported me to the ADE. During the PPAC hearing, the mother of that student testified on my behalf about the positive impact that I had on that student. She also testified at how disappointed she was at the school and the district for never informing her about anything that was going on. They never called her to get her side. They never, if they felt that that student was in danger at any time, the school never contacted the parent. The district never contacted the parent. If they would have, found out from the parent that nothing I did was inappropriate and everything that I did was trying to help that student. The PPAC committee hearing members, made some pretty questionable remarks during their deliberation. Obviously, you see the vote was 3-2, with one member recusing, and that member I knew personally. One committee member stated that he knows that nothing of a sexual nature took place, but yet he still thinks that something did. There was no missing evidence. There's no missing testimony. There's no outside or ongoing investigation. Nothing like that happened. So he didn't make his decision based off of the evidence in front of him. Another committee member said that he couldn't decide whether I was incompetent or whether I was calculated. So even he had doubts about whether or not my intentions were intended to harm someone, but yet he still voted to revoke my license for 5 years. So again, respectfully, I'm just asking the board to reconsider based off of the facts. And I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for equal treatment based off cases similar to this in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Antonio. Next up, we have Ryan Tate, followed by Steve Bellis. Ryan?
Thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to speak on behalf of my clients, Steve Bellis, Sean Rustad, and Manny Palomares. I'm Ryan Tate. I'm a partner at Tate & Hall Law Firm here in Phoenix. The Professional Practices Advisory Committee in the beginning of November had a very difficult task of reviewing over 10,000 pages of information in a short period of time in preparation for what was extraordinarily a 5-day hearing with respect to the licenses of these 3 men and Ken James. They did so at their own expense. As this board knows, they were volunteers, and I think that they paid very, very careful attention and made a very concerted effort to balance both the harms that some of these student victims endured with the level of culpability, the level of knowledge, and the distinguished careers of these 3 men. While the harm to these students was significant, if the board has reviewed the transcripts, I think the board knows that there was quite a bit of difficulty in ascertaining what exactly any of these men knew about what was going on. And at the end of the day, I think the PPAC did a phenomenal job of balancing that in making the recommendations that they have. So I'm standing here today requesting that this board respect the decision that the PPAC made and defer to that and follow the recommendations that they've made. Mr. Bellis, Mr. Palomares have already begun to make plans to implement the recommendations in the hopes that the board will approve those today. Each of these men have had long distinguished careers as educators. I hope that some of the people that submitted letters to the PPAC also submitted public comment to this board. There was an overwhelming number of people who did so on their behalf because of the reputation and the length of their distinguished service to students over many decades of time. I think at the end of the day, the recommendations from the PPAC is an appropriate balancing of everything that happened in this notorious case. And I hope that the board will defer to what the PPAC decided after a grueling hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. It's my understanding that some of the speakers that were originally listed do not want to speak. Instead, their legal counsel will speak for them. So next up, we have Stephen Weiss. Stephen Weiss.
President Narducci, members of the board. I represent Ken James, who is the principal at the high school when these events broke. I don't want to repeat what Mr. Ryan said, but there's some overlap. We had a 5-day hearing before the PPAC, and the only word that I can come up with adequately characterize it was grueling. I've tried a lot of cases over the years, much longer, but this was very compressed. The PPAC had to consider thousands of pages of documents, transcripts, witness statements, and they did a commendable job. It was not an easy task. And that was only part of it because they had to review all of that in the lead up to the hearing and be familiar with it. Mr. James's conduct was previously scrutinized by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, and they found no wrongdoing. His conduct was scrutinized by the district internal investigation. They found no unprofessional conduct. The PPAC decided that some level of discipline was appropriate, and they recommended a letter of censure. Ken James has had a stellar career, 41-year career as a teacher, a coach, an assistant principal, a principal, a high-level administrator, honored as Principal of the Year, and elected by his peers to be president of the Arizona School Administrators Association, and notably is only the second non-superintendent to hold that position. This is a consummate professional with a career devoted to educating our children, keeping them safe, and a career unblemished by any disciplinary action. A professional so highly regarded that former superintendent, Dr. Castile, testified in his behalf and was effusive in her praise for him as a professional, as a human being, as a person of integrity, a person of honesty, someone who would not look the other way in the face of any wrongdoing, and particularly not to shield some athletic program. So you can imagine that his being disciplined for conduct that passed the scrutiny, the strict scrutiny of the Maricopa County Attorney's Office of its own district. You can imagine that the discipline recommended by the PPAC rests hard with Ken. But be that as it may, he can live with that. And as a result, we suggest that you accept the recommendation of the PPAC to impose a letter of censure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Next up, we have Cameo Mejia. Is that virtual, Jessica?
Mr. Mejia is virtual.
Yate and hello to members of the Arizona State Board. Coming to you from the Navajo Nation here near the Four Corners in the Arizona area. My name is Cameo Mejia, and I'm coming before you to hope that you will reconsider the consideration from the PPAC committee that was delivered on December 15th on my behalf. A little bit about myself. So my name is Cameo Mejia. I did recently apply to the Arizona State Board for an Arizona State teaching license because I had previously obtained a fingerprints clearance card. I went through a bachelor's program through Dene College and also a very integrated internship with the elementary school and did very well. I graduated at the top of my class, and at the end of my internship was offered a job, went through the interview, went ahead and went through the Chinle board, and they agreed to hire me after I got based on me getting my license. Now, I applied to the Arizona board. I did put that I had a bit of a criminal past, and that was way behind me. I have since then grown up very, very much. And I may have not put some things that I was involved in, like investigations, and that was my misunderstanding. So the PPAC sort of agreed that, yes, I have grown from my mistakes, but because I'm not so good with the, I wasn't so good with the understanding the application and what the application was asking for. So upon PPAC committee's vote, I was going to be granted my license. I lost that vote in a 2-3 vote, 2 yeses and 3 nos. And I just really, really hope that the committee really takes that into account and maybe could be that 3rd vote for me, because I'm ready to teach. And going into teaching, I'm not just going to teach, but I plan on going above and beyond. So I don't really don't think that the 1 year waiting is going to help anybody, considering the shortage of teachers that we do have in Arizona, especially here on the Navajo Nation. And I have kind of proven to my peers that I'm ready to be at that level. I have quite a few letters from my previous mentors, teachers that I've worked with at Saley Public School, and I have convinced them that I'm ready, even after them hearing about me having to go before the PPAC meeting and disclosing all this. They are still considering me. Yes, we will still hire you upon getting your license. So I really would hope that the Arizona State Board would reconsider that and not have me wait that 1 year. I'm ready to get in there. I'm ready to reinforce some of the literacy programs that I did start while I was in my internship. I'm ready to get in there as a coach. I know some of those things are kind of at a standstill right now because of COVID, but yeah, we found ways to implement our literacy programs virtually, so it was pretty cool. So I hope that the Arizona State Board will consider me. Thank you very much for allowing me to.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. President Narducci, that concludes the item number 9.
All right, we'll move on to item number 10. Here, we'll be going through our general session for certification enforcement actions. And I'll be abstaining from a vote on items number 10A, 10B, 10F, and 10G. And Dr. Kaur will take those items, if possible, out of order, so that we can have board action on them first, and then we'll participate in the other agenda items. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Kaur at this time.
Thank you, President Narducci. So as we heard from public comment, there's a lot to digest on these cases. And I have heard through Director Williams that some members have indicated a desire for a little extra time to digest this. There is a lot of information provided on the record from PPAC. And my question to my colleagues is if the board would like at this time to table these items until our February 28th meeting, so that we can continue to review the record, as I'm told there was some requests to do so. So do any members, both from a distance or here at the table, have any issue or objection to tabling the items 10A, 10B, 10F, and 10G? Any objections to that?
Dr. Board members,
Yeah.
I have no objections. I support that. Talked about the PPAC spending 5 grueling days going over this. Our time limit, of course, is significantly less than that. And I listened carefully to what has been said today. And there's been a lot of advocacy for the educators involved, and I certainly appreciate that. but I'm concerned about the students who were involved. And we have no higher calling than to protect student safety. And I know from my experience that when unpleasant things happen with a athletic program, and it's not unusual for that to happen, but when there is a pattern, it reflects a culture. And the adults are responsible for that culture. So I need more information to convince me that a letter of censure is sufficient in these circumstances.
Thank you, Member Baker. Any other thoughts? Anyone from a distance? Again, given the desire for some members to review the materials further, understanding this puts folks in limbo for another month, but I think in order for us to do our due diligence, I would ask if I have a motion to table items 10A, 10B, 10F, 10G until the board's next meeting, February 28th, in order for members to further review the case documents for the 4 cases. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Was that Member Kay?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Kay. Any other discussion or comments? Yes, Member Baker.
I just wondering what that looks like. I mean, we just take more time and then meet again, or is there something else? And I don't know that there needs to be an answer on that today, but
Sure,
we have the material. We've been able to go over that. What else can be done to help us?
Sure, President
Yeah,
Narducci, Vice
Director
President Core, Member Baker. The board records the PPAC meetings. Some board members have requested to view those meetings. Therefore, they're still reviewing those videos. If you would also like to view those videos, you can. Just a reminder, the information that's in your board book is the only information in which, on top of the video, because it is part of the record, obviously with the transcript of what can be included in the board's decision. So no information outside of the record can influence the board's decision, other than, as you heard today, public comment and whatnot.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any other comments or discussion? I would ask that all in favor of tabling these items, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, with President Narducci's recusal noted.
Thank you. We'll move on to the rest of the items in 10.
President Narducci, 10C would be next.
Thank you. I was just going to. 10C regards item pertaining to David Cochin or Kakin. Any comments or questions regarding that item? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to suspend the teaching certificate of David Cochin or Kakin for a period of 4 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Core. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Baker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. We'll move on to item 10D. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to suspend the teaching certificate of Melissa Morales for a period of 2 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Cord. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Baker. Is there any discussion or comment regarding that case before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. On to item,
That is correct.
okay, thank you. That's good, thank you. Move on to item 10E. This is with respect to Antonio Morieta. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Antonio Morieta for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Cord. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Baker. Any discussion or questions regarding that case before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item. Just kidding. At H, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to deny the application for certification of Cameo Mahia for a period of 1 year, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Cord. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Member Baker. Any discussion or question regarding that case? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it. Move on to item 10I. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to grant the application for certification of Michael Schrey, despite evidence showing that applicant engaged in unprofessional or immoral conduct, because sufficient evidence exists that mitigates applicant's conduct?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Member Baker. I have a second by Dr. Cord. Any questions or comments regarding that case? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it.
Member Wellborn, clarify her vote, please.
Okay, Member Welborn, could you clarify?
Aye, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The ayes have it unanimously. All right, that concludes item 10 on the agenda. We'll move on to item 11.
Thank you, President Arducci. I do not have any updates for the board. Just a reminder that our special meeting starts immediately at the adjournment of this one, which is to close those rules that we opened in item 6B.
Thank you. Are there any items that the board wants to bring to the attention of staff for our next meeting in February? No items? Hearing none, we will move. We're gonna have to move to adjourn. I want to thank, I will thank everybody for their attendance. Thank everybody for your hard work and for your attention to all the matters today as in the past. And hopefully we will see us all again in February, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We're going right into the next meeting.
Oh, we're going right into the
So
next
don't,
meeting.
so don't leave. If you're on
That's right, I
Zoom, please
forgot.
do not leave.
But we need to adjourn, yeah.
Yeah,
We're
adjourned.
adjourning and we're staying here.
Adjourned at 11:41.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're good. Taking a quick, can we take like
Yeah, take a 5-minute break to use the facilities.
5-minute break? Thank you.
And we'll come right back to start our special meeting.